A few days ago, a Christian Facebook friend of mine posted, for some reason or another, the first verse of the book of Genesis as his status. He just posted Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And that got me thinking about the whole Genesis myth and the Judeo-Christian creation myth, which I've spent a lot of time attacking and arguing against and making fun of for a variety of reasons, in person with people and in writing and on YouTube and all over the place. But seeing it then, for some reason, it got me thinking of how much I like the Genesis myth as literature, as poetry, for want of a better term, as mythology. And there are things that I really like about it, like especially when you compare it to other creation myths. And there are some really beautiful creation myths in all the cultures of the world. I really love the Hawaiian creation myth. I love the Hawaiian story of the creation of man, how humans and the taro plant, or kalo as the ancient Hawaiians called it, were created as brothers, but then the one brother died and his body fell into the ground and became the kalo plant, and they called it Haloanaka. I love that phrase in Hawaiian, Haloanaka. There's just something about the way it sounds and when you say it. Combination of vowel sounds and consonants is just really beautiful to me. But I got to thinking about other creation stories, and I got to thinking about the Genesis story in the Bible, and it reminded me of what a huge disservice that Christians do to their own text by insisting that it is one particular thing, which it obviously isn't, and imposing all of these things upon it that it can't bear, and making it difficult for other people outside of their group to enjoy it for what it is, which is a work of mythology and cultural history and poetry and just a lot of things that, if you're allowed to take it just as a work of literature, it can be really enjoyable and really rewarding to read and to study. For instance, the thing I love about the creation story in Genesis as opposed to some of the other ones is the mystery of it, the lack of specificity. I mean, you see God doing all these things, but there's no explanation of how God is doing it, or of what God is actually doing. When he gets to the creation of man, you do see him creating man out of dust, and then when he creates Eve from Adam's rib. There is some specific detail in that, but for the creation of the universe, for the creation of the world, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. There's a mystery to that literarily speaking, I enjoy. I like that. The problem is that people who believe that this book is the inspired and infallible and complete word of God, they tell you that no. Everything in here is true. This all actually happened. And not only that, it's a perfect moral guide for us. And that just ruins it. You can't place those expectations on this book. You can't read it with those assumptions, because it completely fails as both a work of literal history and a moral guide. It is not a very good one of either of those. It's got absolutely abhorrent morality. It's one of the least moral books, if you take it as real, that I can imagine. I mean, imagine the creator of the universe drowning everybody he's created just because he wants a do-over. And Christians are forced to not only believe that that actually happened, even though there's no evidence that it ever happened, but also to believe that it was good, that it was perfectly just for their God to do that. That's a horrible imposition to put not only on the book, but on the people. Think of all the morally twisted things that Christians are obliged to believe. and believe are good and just and fair because it says so in the Bible. Imagine all of the murder and genocide and rape and war and just brutality and sadism that they are forced to rationalize as good and just, that they would never accept in any other context because they believe that the Bible is literally the Word of God. It's a horrible, horrible thing. But if you take the Bible as just a book, as a work of literature, as a collection of ancient myths and poetry, and the King James Bible specifically as a beautifully written translation of those ancient texts, then you can not only disregard the horrible morality of the God and the many other characters that you find in it, because it's just a book, it's just a story. You don't have to be bound by their morality. You don't have to live your life. You don't have to obey the lessons that this book tries to teach you in your own life, because it's just a myth. It's just something to be studied and to be enjoyed as a story, as a piece of literature. And you can excuse the boring parts, because it's not beautiful from wall to wall. There's a lot of filler in here. There's a lot of genealogies that are of no interest to us here today. There are a lot of commandments, there's a lot of rules, and rules that are oddly specific to the local politics and region of the people who wrote the book, for a book that is supposedly, according to Christians, a timeless guide to morality and human behavior. We can disregard all that. We can just chalk that up to it being written by people who lived 5,000 or 6,000 years ago, who had a primitive, ignorant culture, and were still able to create something that has stood the test of time like this. You can take the bits of beautiful poetry and beautiful language that you find in the midst of the boring bits and the rule making and the genealogies, the endless series of begats, and you can enjoy it for what it is. And I think that it's time that atheists and non-Christians who have to spend a lot of time arguing against the horrible, horrible things that are in this book, that we are compelled to argue against, because there are so many people who are trying to claim that this should be the model for our society, and that we should teach children from this book history and science and philosophy. That it's time for us to stand up and to take a break every once in a while from the very good and very necessary work of attacking the literal view of this book, and say, you know what, if you guys would just ease up a little bit, if you guys would just allow us to view this and view these stories as mythology, as literature, as what they actually are, we could all enjoy it, and we could all actually learn some things from it. That would be a good thing, I think. That would be something. Imagine if you removed the burden of Christians constantly pushing the Bible at you as something that you need to accept, and you could just talk about your shared enjoyment of a particular passage or a particular story. And just, you know, it's I guess it's a pipe dream. It's what Christopher Hitchens wrote in God Is Not Great. It would be nice to think that you know, the Christians could study their Bible and the atheists could study Bertrand Russell or Socrates or Carl Sagan, and we could just enjoy our studies, and maybe we could even read each other's stuff from time to time and find things to enjoy and share. But that's probably not going to happen, and I know that. But I still wanted to say one or two things in defense of the Bible as a book, as literature, as a work of fiction, as a work of mythology. Because there are times when it's not that bad. It's pretty good. But there are never any times when I think that it's anything more than that. There are some really beautiful passages in here, some really beautiful uses of language by the King James translators. But there's nothing so beautiful that I think divine intervention was required to compose it.